Good morning, everyone. My name is Dominga Robinson. I am one of the consultants here at SaskCulture. I am the contact in office for the Métis Cultural Development Fund, which is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to get into some details about what this grant's going to look like, what kind of projects are successful, kind of all the little rules and ins and outs that you're going to need to know to be able to apply to this, that are going to help you apply to this. Before we start, here's a look at the agenda on some of the items that we'll be talking about today. We're going to start off with talking about what is SaaS culture and what do we do? What do we mean by culture? Because it's a very broad definition out there in the world, but due to us having a funding program, we've had to get somewhat targeted in what we mean by what. And then I'm going to get into the specifics about what the Métis Cultural Development Fund is, what are its objectives and priorities. I'm going to show you some sample questions. Then we're going to talk about who is eligible, who is ineligible, what kind of expenses does it cover, what doesn't it cover, what isn't allowed. I'm going to show some examples of successful activities. I'll give you some tips, and then we'll talk quickly about how grants are reviewed and awarded and the top 10 reasons proposals are rejected and what to do if you get a good decline. So we've got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to go ahead and get into it. So SaaS culture, we are not government. There's a misconception out there, just given the name that we are government. We are not. We are a nonprofit community-based organization, the same as anybody else's. We have a member or a board that is elected from membership, by the membership. There's 12 of them. And so they are representative of the people in the community. And what we do, the main things that we do is that we distribute a portion of the lottery funds. So in Saskatchewan, we're very, very fortunate to have a Saskatchewan lottery system here where a portion of the proceeds from every lottery ticket that's sold goes back into the community to support sport, culture, and recreation. We are the cultural distributors of those funds. So we help to keep the culture happening in the community. So almost everything you see that's happening out there that's cultural usually has gotten some money from this system. Our goal is to build a culturally vibrant province, so we have a far reach and we work with a lot of organizations. What do we do other than funding? We have consultants like myself to answer questions. I am one of four, so I have 3 colleagues here who are also running funding programs who are here to consult. We'll come out into your community and do info sessions. We do training things. We're always trying to inform people and get them involved in the system. We support peer-to-peer learning through social media, blogs. We do Culture Days, which is a national initiative that takes place across the country the last weekend in September. So we run a funding program and support it through marketing to get people to do activities for that weekend across the province. We also run Creative Kids program, which is a charity program, which provides individual families funding up to $750 per child to participate in creative activities that is based on financial need. And when we speak children, we are talking ages 4 to 19 years old. We also do diversity and inclusiveness training and implementation with organizations. We have a very strong cultural network where all of those folks that are applying and getting money also speak to each other. So we have a tool called eUpdate and Engage, and our website is filled with resources and contact information of other cultural organizations. We engage in advocacy and public awareness, and we have a lot of really strong partnerships out there, including obviously with the other globals, SasSport, who distributes lottery funds, Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association, who also does the same, but for Parks and Rec. We work very, very closely with the Saskatchewan Arts Board, and we have a partnership in place with the Federation of Saskatchewan Indigenous Nations. So that's a little bit about SAS culture and what we do. What do we mean by culture? Because I mean, even in university, I learned about this. They're like, pop culture, everything is culture, everything we do is culture. No, we had to put some limitations on that. So when we are speaking about culture, we are talking about 4 main areas. That would be your arts, which is your music, your dance, your visual arts, your film, your photography, dancing. Those things are considered arts. Then we have the multiculturalism, which is cultural to ethnocultural groups. So there's two types of projects that usually come out of that, and usually what we'll see are things where people are transferring knowledge within their own ethnocultural group. So I am trying to teach a group of young children about who they are and who we are. And then there's also the element of ethnoculturalism, sharing it outside and creating cross-cultural understandings with the public at large. So if people are not familiar with what my culture is and what it entails and what it means, they can engage with activity to learn who we are as a people. Heritage, these are all the museums, the natural environment, intangible cultural heritage. Heritage are those things of the past that we want to keep around to help learn about. So a lot of museums, a lot of heritage projects come through there where people are engaging in learning about history. And then we have the cultural industries. We do a little bit in here in terms of development of items in cultural industries, but usually if you're making a profit, we're not the agency that you want to be speaking to. That would be Creative Saskatchewan. If you're making a product that you will sell for a profit, those are the guys that support that. But when we are speaking cultural industries, that's, you know, your book publishing, your music recording, your film making and editing, those types of activities where something will be created that will then be sold for a product or a profit. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, that's a little bit about who SaskCulture is and what we mean by culture, because not everything can come through these grants. I'm going to talk now about the Métis Cultural Development Fund. This grant specifically is for Métis communities and people wanting to engage with Métis culture to preserve, strengthen, and transmit Métis culture and traditions and develop Métis leadership in Saskatchewan through cultural workers. The maximum amount that you can apply to for this grant is $10,000. It has a deadline April 30th and October 31st. So we have one coming up at the end of the month here. The MCDF will cover 80% of total eligible project costs. So up to for anything over $5,000. So at $6,000, I need to have $1,500 coming from somewhere else. If I'm asking for $10,000, I need $2,500 coming from a source outside of the lottery system. So you're going to want to make sure that you're not matching or trying to match with other lottery funds. Those will be deemed ineligible. Anything 5,000 and under, you do not need a matching contribution. You can just go ahead and apply 100% there. So what are the objectives? Because one of the main things and one of the main reasons people get declines is they are unclear in why they are trying to do it, and they're not aligning properly with the grant that they're applying to. So in this case, I'm going to show you what the objectives are for the grant, and hopefully what you're doing aligns with those if you're trying to apply. So we want to preserve, strengthen, renew, promote, and transmit Métis perspectives, culture, and traditions to both Métis and non-Métis communities. We want to mentor and build leadership skills in the Métis community. Increase employment opportunities for Saskatchewan Métis arts and culture people. So you should be hiring Métis arts and culture workers for your projects here. That's one of the goals of what we're trying to do here. You're going to want to meet the need for cultural awareness, cultural activity, skill development, personal growth, positive lifestyles at the individual, group, and community level. This grant likes projects that benefit children through skill development and membership. So if your target group is children, you're a step ahead. It encourages gathering, sharing, learning, and developing Métis culture in Métis communities. So that's that ethnocultural inside exchange of knowledge. So engaging with my own Métis community to teach about Métis culture and history and celebrating it. Some of the priorities for this grant. So those are the bigger objectives. Now the priorities are some of the things that we use to rank who gets the money or not. So the closer you are at hitting these priorities, the better your chances of getting the grant. So retention and revival aimed at building long-term cultural awareness and pride. So one-offs usually don't do as well in here. They're looking for something that's a little bit more long-term impactful. The high level of access and participation, what that is referring to is making sure that it's accessible to the community, that it's something that if you are holding it out of town, that you've thought about transportation. Usually that also comes into play when if you are charging or not charging people to participate, that creates maybe a different accessibility level for you and will be assessed. It also has a priority on researching, documenting, and sharing Métis culture. So this one is a little different in that it allows those types of research type of and documentation type projects. This one likes use of innovative and unique methods to transfer knowledge. Strong community partnerships and support are really important with this grant, particularly if you're a non-Métis organization. You absolutely should be partnered with a Métis organization to be able to carry off the activities. And again, this one likes youth. It likes significant involvement of youth, and projects that are based in the province's northern and rural communities are going to be ranked in a higher priority. So what are the questions that you're going to have to answer? Well, first of all, you're going to need to gather up this information. This is usually good information to have on hand if you're applying for any kind of grant, to be honest, because everybody's going to want to know this information. But they're going to want to know your mission and mandate. You're going to have to provide your organizational structure, signed financial statements. If you are a nonprofit organization, we're going to need you to have those signed by both a treasurer or a president or some sort of authorizer. Organizational programming history. So this is, if you haven't done culture in the past, we'd like to know that you are capable of doing some sort of project, so showing that you can. If you have done culture in the past, we'd like to know what you've done and how those things have gone. This is building a sense of security with the peer assessors that you are capable and have the capacity to be able to complete cultural programming. They're going to want to know who your previous funders are, who has supported you in the past. Has it been this fund? Is there other lottery funding coming in? How are you guys operating? You're going to need the biographies for your key cultural workers, any brochures, any support material. You have to keep in mind that the peer assessors who are making the decision may have no idea who you are at all. So when you're providing that organizational information, it is your introduction to them. So you're going to want to make sure that they don't have any questions, that they're able to answer those things and know who you are and what you're capable of doing by the time you're done with providing your organizational information. For our applications, you're going to need 2 authorized signatures. So these are a president, a treasurer, board members, senior staff, management, people who are authorized to apply. We're going to need 2 of those to move forward with the application. So what is the project information that we're going to need? So by the time you're applying for this grant, we're assuming that you've already done some planning and some legwork to be able to apply, that you know what you're applying for. But you're going to have to be able to explain how your project fits the objectives that I outlined before and which ones you align with and how you're achieving those things. The clear explanation of intended impact of the project. What are your long-term goals? What are your immediate goals? Making sure that you're clearly understanding why you're doing what you're doing. This is to encourage the peer assessors to have faith in you, that what you're doing is truly something that's going to have an impact in the community. Those things are kind of important to do with all grants. And then we need to know clearly what activities will take place. A lot of times we get project descriptions and they're 1 sentence long. That is not sufficient. We need to know if you are having a gathering of some sort, what exactly are you going to be doing at that activity? Really, agendas, if you have them, are great assets to these. Timelines for planning are important as well, to show that you've thought out the amount of time it's going to take to put something together and given yourself sufficient time so you're not last minute scrambling. So details are so important to give when you're trying to fill out that. Again, your project timeline. Who is your target audience? Now, sometimes we'll get applications where it's like everybody, The whole community is our target audience. Are those the people that you're going to have an impact on? You need to get specific in there. Usually you're not going to, it's unrealistic to assume that you're going to have an impact on an entire community. You're probably going to want to get specific in who that target audience is. Is it youth between the ages of 14 and 19? Is it younger kids? Is it boys? Is it girls? Is it everybody? Is it families? That's another demographic that really exists. So really being specific in that and not saying everybody, because that's not realistic in terms of you being able to evaluate whether you've had that impact or not. How will the goals of the project impact that group? So making sure that your impact aligns with that target group is very important as well. Letters of support. Now we have in our grant that it is optional to provide letters of support. I would never ever take the option of not providing letters of support. What those do is they build a sense of confidence in the peer assessors that you are building something that the community actually wants and that they are going to participate in. So letters of support from participants, from the traditional knowledge keepers, from partner organizations, these all show the peer assessors that people really want what you're offering and what you're going to be building here, and that you have a higher chance of success because you have those people on board. You're going to want to identify the other partner organizations and participants and volunteers that are involved. Thinking through your people assets and what you're going to need is an important part, because we're going to ask you. A plan for how you will evaluate whether you've had a success in the impact area. So are you going to survey people? Are you going to verbally interview them? Are you tracking school attendance to see if that is one of the goals that you're trying to have, is them increasing attendance? Are you tracking them after the project is done to see if they still continue on with whatever activity? You need to have a plan right up front for how you're going to evaluate, because going back afterwards and trying to evaluate that is going to be a challenge, and you're probably not going to get the numbers that you want. Where if you build it ahead of time, we're going to ask you about it, you run a better chance of being successful. You're going to have to know your balanced budget with description of the calculations and details. We need real details in there. Saying elders $5,000 is not sufficient. I need to know how many elders, how many are you paying elders? That could be 2 elders at $2,500. No, we need to know the details on how you came up with every calculation that you put into your budget. Per day costs, really break it down into details. By the time you're done submitting this, we should be able to tell who are you hiring, who are you working with, where are you having this, who's your target audience, what exactly will you be doing, what exact activities will you be doing, and how much is it going to cost. Once I have all of those answers to those questions, we can go ahead and make an informed decision. You do not want the peer assessors trying to figure out what you mean and trying to search for those answers to those questions. If they're there, they can just focus on the quality of what you're doing and not get distracted with some of the other things that come up. You're going to want to have a marketing plan, including how SaskCulture will be recognized in the promotions. So just thinking about how are you going to verbally acknowledge, is the logo going to be on the poster? Is the logo on your website? Are you going to invite someone to bring greetings? Really thinking through how you're going to market and get the participants in there. Who is eligible for this? Registered nonprofit organizations, including Métis locals and regions, who've been in existence for at least 1 year. If you haven't been in existence for 1 year, we ask that you contact us and we will explore some other options. But at this point, though, right off the hop, you're ineligible, because we need you to be able to have submitted some financial statements to ISC, which is something that you do at 1 year. First Nations bands and municipalities are also eligible. They do not need financial statements because these guys are just in a different, they don't have to register with ISC, but yeah, they're also eligible. So who is ineligible? Schools and post-secondary institutions are ineligible. Unincorporated community groups, although you may consider forming a partnership with someone who is eligible, on your own you would not be eligible. And then individuals or unincorporated groups are not eligible for this grant. You need to have that incorporation for a year or a partner with someone who is. What are some of the eligible expenses? Well, salary and benefits for cultural resource people. These are not folks that are already on staff. These are, you're hiring a cultural worker to do something. If they are someone on staff, then it needs to be clearly shown that this is something outside of their regular job duties, and that's why they're being hired for that. The travel expenses for the people. We live in Saskatchewan. It's very big, so we understand that sometimes people need to travel to bring cultural resource people in, so we'll cover those expenses, as well as for the program participants. If you're taking a group of youth out onto the land, we understand you need to pay for someone to take them out there, whether that's rental of a bus or pay mileage to people. That's something that would be covered. Facility costs. Although we see these in here, usually that shouldn't be a huge expense. A lot of times you can get space for very little. And a lot of times people will work with you, especially if you're a community-based organization, to give you a reduced cost. So we don't, usually that's not a huge expense. The biggest expenses probably in these budgets should be salary and benefits of the people, and then the project expenses, which are the materials and supplies that are needed to do that cultural activity. So for example, if I am doing moss bags, all of the expenses for the beads and the leather and all the different little material pieces that I need would all be something that would be eligible to be included in this. Nutrition is also included. We do understand you are getting people together and you need to feed them. However, we have put a limitation on that because it really shouldn't be too overly expensive to buy some little snacks and things. These are not pizza parties. These are not everyone, let's go to McDonald's. These are nutritional snacks to help get people through an activity so that they're not hungry. Now, let me just clarify this as well. If my activity is actually making food, those costs actually supplies and not nutrition expenses. For example, if I'm holding a bannock making workshop, all of the flour and the oil and the baking soda that I need to make the bannock and show people how to make bannock would be considered a project expense. If I am just hiring someone to make bannock and they're going to go off site and they're going to make bannock and they're going to bring it, that's a nutrition expense. So just to clarify those two things. Advertising, again, if you have a target audience, you should know exactly how to get to them, how to contact them. So we've put a limitation on how much you can spend for advertising for this at 10%, because you shouldn't need too much. If you know exactly who they are, you should know how to communicate with them. Plus, Facebook is a great advertiser nowadays, and it's very, very inexpensive. So we have a limitation of 10% for advertising. Here are some of the ineligible expenses. Capital expenses, unfortunately, are not included in this. So this is renovations, repairs, major equipment, computers, video camcorders, purchasing anything that's going to live with you guys and live beyond and will be used for years to come. That's considered a capital expense and is not eligible. Cash prizes, gifts, and the purchase of alcohol are not eligible. An activity that promotes definable religious or political viewpoints are not eligible. And contribution of volunteer hours. So you can't put a dollar amount on the volunteer hours and say that that's a contribution, or that you're paying someone this amount because that's how much it would cost for them to do that. If it's volunteer, it's volunteer, and it doesn't have a dollar value that we will take into account. Other ineligible expenses are allowances, wages, or personal expenses for program registrants. So you can't pay people to participate. That's not an eligible expense. Again, I alluded to this before, but the salaries and expenses of existing staff are not eligible. Any of your office and admin fees, including rent, print costs, those things are not eligible because you should already be paying for those through your organizational operational dollars and shouldn't need project funding to cover those things. In kind, we we ask that you kind of tell us about your in-kind, but do not include it in your financial amounts because it throws things off, and we need financial contributions, not in-kind contributions. So that's a little bit about expenses, ineligible and eligible. I'm going to showcase some of the cool projects that have come through the MCDF in the last little while. Right now I'm showing you the art gallery of Swift Current. Last summer, they did a Métis Red River Cart history and culture project, and they did this also in partnership with Saskatchewan History and Folklore Society for the launch of their Battleford Trek. But what they did was they commissioned a Red River cart to be made that they use now in the community to go out and take down and put together and talk about the history of Métis people, the Métis Red River cart, and then people get to go in there and actually try putting together this cart and such. So they've been having that around the schools and at different public events within Swift Current and area over the last year, and that will, yeah, they'll continue on with those hopefully. So they were successful in getting $9,000 for that. This is another example of a project that's been coming through the Métis Cultural Development Fund for some time now. This is the Laloche Friendship Center. Every year they gather a group of youth along with elders, and they will voyage down to from Laloche all the way down to Batoche. They take them down their traditional trails. They teach them the stories of the land. They teach them how to live off of the land, and they really engage with that outdoor living off the land lessons, medicine teachings, and things like that with the elders. They end up at Batoche for Back to Batoche weekend, and they hang out there for the weekend, and then they come home. So it's a nice little history trip for them. And then Comfy, Central Urban Métis Federation out of Saskatoon, held a Métis Knowledge Keepers and Elders Youth Conference, where they got them together to understand and celebrate Métis contributions to Canada, engaged in some great dialogue, some storytelling, and really giving the youth a chance to engage with the elders, which is always a good thing. So they were successful at getting $5,000 for that. Up on our website, if you go onto any one of the grant pages, the grant program pages, what you're going to find at the bottom is some links to lists of past funding programs and who was successful in those. So this is an example of MCDF Fall 2017 and who got money and for what. These are great tools to kind of show you what is happening in a grant, what kinds of things you could be successful applying for, and what things maybe not so much. So I'll just let you see those. I won't go into detail on them, but yeah, you can see Friends of Batoche got some money for Louis Riel. Saskatoon Indian Métis Friendship Center gets their Métis Cultural Project, where they do jigging competitions and piano and jigging fiddle guitar lessons, and they really engage the community in the Métis culture. The Westmount Community Association got some money to do a project with the Westmount School, where they're spending children aged 8 to 12 are spending 16 weeks learning violin and fiddle from the famous John Arcand. Illala Cross got some money for a radio Michif project, where they're engaging with high school students and the local radio station and cable station to implement Michif language into some Michif language lessons into some of the broadcasts. There was an event that happened in Moose Jaw that is all about Métis culture and workshops and entertainment, and so engaging with that community with those types of things. The Northern Village of Beauval was given some funds to have a fiddle program up there. And then the Saskatoon Mother Center was given some funds to do a moss bag project, where they're bringing in Leah Dorian to engage with the mothers on what the history and importance of moss bags are, and to engage in Métis flower beading on the moss bags and that important element. So tips. If you are a non-Métis, you need to be partnering. I'm going to say that really again. It's very important that you work with the community and the cultural people that you're looking to engage with. If you're a Métis org, you should be fine on your own. But if you're a non-Métis organization, you're going to want to ensure that you are working very, very closely with the Métis community and that you are engaging with Métis cultural workers who are well respected in the community. The people who are making these decisions are very well versed in these types of things and will know. Impact is meaningful. Again, that you are hitting the objectives and aligning with the grant. That's very important. Why is it important to the participants? What is the impact? What changes is going to have? Why is it important to your organization? Why is it important to the Métis community? This is your chance to show your passion for the application and the project, and to share that with the peer assessors as to why it's so important and they need to do that. And then just clearly outline the detail. By the time I'm done, I should know who you're doing it with, who you're working with, what you're doing exactly, when you're doing it, and how much it's going to cost. How are the grants reviewed and awarded? So typically I will review the applications when you submit them. If I have any questions or anything, I will be coming back to applicants for edits, asking for clarification on information. Once I'm done all of that work and we're all good to go, the grants are sent to a group of peer assessors. They will be assessing them on these are pretty much the exact same categories they're going to be assessing the application on. So the extent to which the project addresses one or more objectives of the program, the extent to which the project provides a significant opportunity to preserve and promote culture and identity, the quality of the proposed activity, the realistic and responsible use of resources, this would be your budget, the uniqueness of the activity, the project presenting an innovative approach to addressing the goals of the program, the evidence of your organization to carry out the project and deliver quality programs and services. So that's that organizational information and background I was talking about. You do get assessed on that. And the extent and support and involvement from the community. These are your letters of support. These are your partners. So making sure you have those pieces. Actually, you do get assessed on them. So even if you don't, I've seen declines happen because of it. So the top 10 reasons proposals get rejected. It's a poor fit for the organization or the program. So what you're doing might not quite be cultural, and it might not quite be Métis cultural. Those are things that will get you declined. So just making sure that you're really clear on what you're doing here. The proposal guidelines are not adhered to, so you haven't answered all of the questions, you're skimming through, you're not really giving it the attention that it needs. Those things, if they have questions, they're usually not gonna, it's highly unlikely that the chances of you getting funded are significantly diminished. The impact is not clear or provided. You're duplicating services. So we know someone else down the block is doing something and you're doing the exact same thing, and we're wondering why you don't know that they're doing that and why you are not working with someone who's already doing something like that in the community. Blanket proposals where it's just not a good fit. You're just throwing in an application. You haven't read the guidelines and you don't know what the fund is supposed to be doing. So you throw something in, it's usually not going to work. And those are a top 10 reason proposals get rejected. There's no long-term goal. So you're just doing this to have fun and you don't know why you're doing it. Although there is a celebration nature to this grant, usually that celebration should have some meaning as to why you're doing it and why you're celebrating. Maybe it's building pride. I don't know, but you need to make sure that you know what your long-term goals are. Unrealistic expectations. So in 3 months from now, I'm going to have the world's biggest jigging competition and I've got nobody on board and no money. Well, they're just not going to fund that because they don't believe that you'll be able to do it. So, and you got to remember the peer assessors are people from the community. So they are people who are doing cultural work all the time and know exactly how much work something takes to do. If they see unrealistic things in there, they're going to decline. Inaccurate, vague, or poorly written. I can't suggest to people more. Have someone else look at your application before submitting it. Someone who is completely unfamiliar with the project to check for those edits. I've seen peer assessors get completely distracted by improper use of terminology, to the point where I can't even tell you what those projects are anymore, but I can tell you one inappropriate thing that they put into their app that distracted them from even discussing the project. So just making sure you have someone else look at that can make a big difference. No or unclear donor recognition, so you have no marketing plan. You don't know how you're gonna recognize anybody. And then the lack of evidence of community support. Like I said, those are no letters of support from anybody. Does anyone even know you're doing this? Does anyone care? Do they want to participate? If there's those types of questions that are happening, the chances of you getting a decline are higher. So you did all the work and you got a decline. What to do? If no rationale is provided, you want to ask the funder for a reason why. We always will provide comments in the letters, whether they're approved or declined, as to why things happened and the rationale for those decisions. So those will be there. If you're unclear as to what the comments mean, feel free to contact me and I'll tell you exactly what they meant by that. Readjust your application based on what they say. They're giving you those information and those tips as a way to help guide you to make your project better, and they want you to reapply. So reapply. If they give you feedback to reapply, readjust and reapply. Again, ensuring you're applying to the best project possible. If you haven't talked to people, whenever I was applying for grants on the outside, I would always talk to a consultant before I actually went ahead and did the application. I encourage you to contact me and speak to me before you go ahead and do the work on an app. I'll help determine whether you're going in the right, I can help point you in the right direction or help guide you towards potential partnerships, or help you out with that as best I can before you get in your application. If you're ineligible, I'll catch it off right away, and you won't have wasted a bunch of your time trying to apply to something that isn't even a good fit. Apply to new sources if there are better fits for your project. So here's the ways you can connect with us. We're always sharing different tools and resources. Our website, www.saskculture.ca, has tons of things online, all including the links to the online grants, because all of our grants are online now. You're not going to find paper copies anywhere. Everything is online with links to an online granting program. We are on Twitter and Facebook, so follow us for new things coming up. We'll do that. Again, MCDF deadlines, April 30th, October 31st. You can contact me. There's my contact information on this right here. Give me an email or a call. I'll be willing to help you out. Let's open this up for questions now. You can type them into your dashboard. If you have anything, please feel free to ask those questions and I'll do my best to answer them. So I'll give people a second for that. I can't see if there are any. So yeah, in your dashboard there, you're able to just type things in, and you can send privately or send to all, and we can try to address those questions. If you don't have any questions, once again, my contact information is there. I am available to answer questions after the fact or anytime. Oh, it looks like there's a question there. I cannot see it. Jeez, sorry about this, folks. I'll get this all worked out. I don't have any questions. Your presentation, it said it was 10%. What? I'm just wondering about the nutrition amount. Was 15? No, it's 10%. Depending on the grant, you're going to want to make sure that whatever fund you're applying to, that you're quite clear on those things, because they do vary per program. For this one, it is 10%. So 10% for advertising and 10% for food. Any other questions? Was that good, Naomi? Is that your good answer? Okay, good, good. Okay. Are there any other questions? It looks like we might be good. I don't know if anyone's got any further. I'll give you another minute or so to potentially put forward any questions. I think we're okay. So once again, I am here and available. If you are going to apply, I encourage you to reach out and talk to me about your project before you do it, just to potentially save us all some time. And again, I can give you some tips and things to make sure that you're hitting the targets that we're looking for. Yeah, and that is about it. I'd love to thank you all for tuning into the webcast today. This was a lot of fun. I like talking about grants. This is my thing. So again, reach out if you have questions and stay connected with us. We love talking with you guys. So thank you very much, and you have a good weekend. It's Happy Friday, so have a good weekend.